Hey, seventh graders, it's me, Mr. Allard, again with one of our flipped lessons. Today we're coming to you via location. It's obviously the last day of spring break, so I'm coming to you from my couch because I didn't feel like going all the way into school to shoot this. Try to get a little bit ahead of the game. Today we're going to be talking about the French and Indian War. We're also going to be trying a new program called Ed Puzzle. So eventually, we're going to stop. We're going to answer some multiple choice questions. We're going to do the first one together in class so that everyone is kind of hip to how to do it by the time we let you loose on where we're going. But as normal, you're going to see the PowerPoint slides. You're going to see your notes. The parts to put into your notes are going to be the bold and underlined. Everything else is going to be the same. All right, here we go. All right, so a little bit of background, because remember, we skipped ahead a little bit. So we've been talking right now about kind of the Erie Canal, so now we're going back towards the colony versions. And we talked about during the colonies, during New France, New Spain, New England, all those guys, um, that they were big rivals. And this rivalry had really been developing between France and England pretty much since the early 1600s when their colonies really started to take shape, particularly over land that we now know as the Ohio River Valley. That land was particularly good farmland. We all know the importance of being next to a river. The Ohio River went into the Mississippi River to transport goods and people, so it was particularly good for trade. And both Britain and France had kind of laid claim to this land, and by the 1750s, we're starting to get clashes between French colonists and American, which we would also know as English colonists during this time. Um, the war is going to be fought not only in American Canada from about 1754 to 1763. It's going to be fought for a couple years unofficially in in the colonies, but this is really, quite honestly, one of the first world wars of um, our history because we're going to have battles of this war fought in Europe. We're going to have battles of this war fought in the colonies. We're going to have battles of the war fought in the Caribbean and Africa, and even as far as Asia. You may hear this war talked about when you get into global studies as the Seven Years' War, but French and Indian War, 7 Years' War is kind of very similar. But that's just a little bit of the background, a little bit of a review from what we've kind of talked about, and we'll be doing a little bit more review as we go through. So causes. We've got England kind of pushing east to west. We've got France kind of coming down from Canada, kind of north to south, and then kind of pushing back a little bit. Um, England is really getting concerned about French forts being built in the area. And you can kind of see them on the map there, um, particularly Fort Duquesne, which is going to be right kind of where the Allegheny River and the Ohio River meet, is going to be a pretty important one. The population of England, as we talked about earlier, of the English colonies, is much larger than the French colonies. So as English colonists kind of come through, they're going to have to deal with these forts and French soldiers, which is pretty much creating these international incidences throughout the Ohio River Valley, and it's very concerning for England. And basically, what England would like France to do is kind of stick to Canada, take their forts out, and just deal with Canada. France doesn't want to do that because remember they also own New Orleans. So if they have these forts by using the Ohio River and then by using the Mississippi River, they can get to New Orleans very, very quickly, very, very efficiently with trade goods, particularly furs and things like that. So the first conflicts of this war are going to involve somebody that is pretty famous in American history, and quite honestly, he's not going to be very successful in the very beginning of being a general, and that's going to be George Washington. He's going to lead a small force into Ohio. Washington's from Virginia. This is done by the Virginia governor, who is appointed by the English crown, who basically creates a force and tells Washington to deliver some letters to the French officers to basically, leave, or we're going to fight you. Pretty much is what's going to happen. He had hoped to capture Fort Duquesne, or at least before he tried to capture it, he wanted to hope the French would leave. That didn't happen. Um, he was defeated trying to assault the fort. He did not have enough troops to take down the fort, and he kind of out of necessity builds Fort Necessity not that far, pretty much on the other side of the river from Fort Duquesne, right in the area which is now the city of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. The Fort Necessity didn't work out very much because the French had allies had been pretty much in the Ohio River Valley much longer than the English had been, so they had a lot of Native American allies. So a combined force of the French and Native Americans drive off George Washington, and quite honestly, he was lucky to be alive on his retreat home. So with this kind of hostilities, Britain is going to send a more formal party led by General Edward Braddock to drive the French out of the Ohio River Valley. It is not going to go very well. We're going to talk about why it's not going to go very well in a little bit. He is soon defeated, and during his retreat, you are in the video. Just had a quick guest starring appearance right there, but we'll keep going. Braddock was defeated actually as he was retreating. He was ambushed by a group of French soldiers and Native Americans, and he was not only defeated, but Braddock himself was killed. This is going to spark Britain to basically say, well, we're going to full out declare war in 1756. By this time, France and England had already really been fighting a war in Europe and in other colonies around the world for about 2 full years. So this would then become an extension of that war that they were already fighting. So let's look at a tale of tape. Let's compare the size between England and France. Both of them had Native American allies. England with the Iroquois was probably the strongest Native American group during the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s. France would be the Algonquin tribes, the tribes up with Canada, which also happened to be kind of the mortal enemies of the Iroquois. So we had rivals from Europe, basically using our already rivals from the Native American cultures as well. You can look at the colonial population differences. Uh, at this time, England's got close to 1 million, where France is right around 70,000. So that's going to, in terms of war, that means France is going to be bringing soldiers from France way more often than England has to because they can rely on colonists to kind of fill the ranks. The colonial activities we kind of talked a little bit about already. England was a much more organized colony with towns and trades and farmland and things like that. France was fur trading, missionaries were coming, and that's going to hurt France a little bit, particularly in the Ohio River Valley, because many of the settlements that are happening for France are simply forts where England has towns and villages where they can draw soldiers from, they can draw supplies from, and things like that. France has to rely on all of those things being brought to America from France or from other colonies in the Caribbean and areas like that. So, early battles. Things are not going well for England in the early battles. France has many of its kind of forts already secured and things like that. England does not. So France kind of captures British forts along Lake Ontario and Lake George very, very quickly. Um, they also have another strategy where the France is using its Native American allies to raid farms and villages from anywhere from New York to Virginia. Anyone who's kind of on the frontier, close to that Ohio River line, close to those Appalachians, to try to scare the colonists to not back the war. Um, British settlers' farms and houses are being burned. You're going to see kind of what you may have heard in the news lately with the refugee crisis. There's going to be a refugee crisis with this war, as many colonists are going to leave, their homesteads in numbers numbering probably thousands to tens of thousands, leaving their farms on the frontier to come back into the cities, and the cities are going to have to deal with that, and it's not going well at all for Britain here early on. Um, Basically, the first 3 years of the war, France is pretty much dominating the war in Canada and along the Ohio River Valley. They're going to win major victories at Fort Oswego, Fort Ticonderoga, which is up in the Adirondack area. They're also going to win a major battle at Fort William Henry. basically France is trying to control kind of the Great Lakes, the river valleys, so they need that because they need to be able to use those rivers and lakes to be able to transport troops and goods and things that they're going to need to fight the war effort. However, a turning point is going to come when Britain appoints a new foreign minister, William Pitt. Again, kind of the Pittsburgh references, that's where that name's going to come from as well. And he's going to help turn the tide about 1758. He becomes in, and he's going to bring new strategies to the war. He makes peace with important Native American allies, so he's going to bring some of the Native Americans besides the Iroquois who were kind of not involved in the war. He's going to bring them in to help Britain. And he's also going to use some Native American fighting strategies. One of the most difficult things, and it seems kind of obvious to us now, is we always refer to the British as the Redcoats. Well, guess what sticks out really well when you're fighting battles in a forest? That's right, a red coat. So Britain is going to kind of use some of these more quick guerrilla style fighting and not really rely on many of the big, grand, we're going to line up and fight major battles, at least in the Ohio River Valley. You're still going to see that type of fighting happen in places like Quebec, in Fort Niagara, and things like that, but where it's more out in the open. But they're also going to rely on using those Native Americans, using different forces to then fight those troops uh, within the Ohio River Valley. Use those more kind of quick, small-scale battle type plans. Use camouflage, things like that. After 1758, Britain is going to go on a string of victories because basically the longer the war is, that's the worst case scenario for France because that means they have to keep bringing supplies and supplies and supplies and supplies. In September of 1759, General James Wolfe is going to lead a surprise attack on Quebec because basically Quebec did not think they would be attacked this late in the year because you're risking getting in there for winter. He scales over the mighty fortress that they have built up on the hill, draws the French forces out into the plains of Abraham, and kind of quickly defeats them, capturing that city. As he had gone up to Quebec, he had also captured cities like Montreal and places like that. British victory is going to a key victory at Fort Niagara. Fort Niagara controls the Niagara River, is going to control in between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, which is going to cut off those supply forts for the French. So the French are not going to be able to get reinforcements of troops or supplies into those Ohio River Valley forts, which is going to create a lot of siege warfare where basically Britain is going to kind of surround the fortress and wait them out until they have no more food, they have no more ammunition, things like that. These strategies kind of combined are going to lead England to eventual victory in the war, and they're going to defeat the French. In 1763, French officials and British officials are going to meet in Paris, and they're going to draw up what is called the Treaty of Paris. France is going to lose all of its Canadian territory and any land east of the Mississippi River. England's going to get all French territory in Canada. They're going to get Florida, and they're going to get the rights to the Caribbean slave trade, which is going to be a big kind of economic gain. Spain, who was involved a little bit here, kind of towards the end, helping supply Britain. Spain wasn't too involved in the Canadian American part of the war, but the European part of the war they were a little bit more involved in. So they're going to get all the territory west of the Mississippi River and New Orleans. I know what you're thinking. By 1804, we're not buying the Louisiana Purchase from Spain. We're buying it from the French. But from 1763 to roughly about another 30 years, Spain is going to control that territory. But again, just like France, they're not going to do a whole heck of a lot with it outside of using the city of New Orleans. So effects of the war. Well, many Native American groups are losing out on a key ally. One of them is going to be Chief Pontiac, and he's going to form a Native American alliance and kind of lead an attack back on the British. This is going to be a bloody, bloody war. This is frontier fighting. This is, not the typical we're going to line up and fight that way. This is brutal, brutal warfare, burning homes, attacking villages, things like that. That war is going to end in 1765, um, and kind of roughly, at least on the East Coast, kind of stop any kind of hostilities between Native Americans and the British proper. There's going to be some still issues with the colonists going into the Ohio River Valley and stuff like that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. To kind of as a result and kind of to end those issues, England is going to issue the Proclamation of 1763, which we're going to talk a little bit about later, which is going to stop any expansion into any of that new territory gained by as a result of the French and Indian War, which is going to upset a lot of colonists. One of the main reasons the colonists were so supportive is the ability to move westward into this new territory to gain new farmland, access to the Ohio River, access to the Mississippi River for trade and things like that, which is going to be one of the initial causes of friction between the colonies of Great Britain, which is eventually going to lead to issues involving the American Revolution. But that's it for this. I know we went a little bit long. I'm going to post this up on Schoology. I'm not expecting you to listen. We're going to do most of this in class with our new Ed Puzzle program, but it's going to be up there for any of you folks who are absent, so you can kind of follow along and get business taken care of, even if you're not in class. As always, if you have any questions on anything, send me a message on Schoology. Post to the course. Maybe some of your students can be helpful in helping out as well. All right. Have a good one. See ya.